And I have to tell you, I speak to many world leaders. When I speak to Friedrich Merz, it's an open, honest conversation, even when we have disagreements, and often we have agreements. But these are open conversations between friends and people who respect each other. I have to say that I took note not only of our differences, but also the forthright statements that you made about what Israel is doing for the rest of humanity. You said that during the Rising Lion operation, our 12-day war with Iran. You said it just now in Ankara, quite forcefully. And I think these and other statements are very important because they reflect a deeper commitment which expresses the intertwined destinies of Israel and Germany. We went through the greatest tragedy that any people suffered on German soil and committed by Germans. And the generations that followed the Holocaust were understood that there was a special moral commitment to enable the Jewish state, the Jewish people, to recover from this horror. And Germany was committed and remains committed to Israel's security in many important ways. What has happened since the rise of the Jewish state is that we have been able to fend off our enemies, and in order to do that, we developed capacities that now enable us to reciprocate. Not only does Germany work in the defense of Israel, but Israel, the Jewish state, 80 years after the Holocaust, works for the defense of Germany. And that is a historical change that comes at the time of great international turbulence and change. We discussed the ways that we can continue this defense cooperation in a changing world, but it's not only cooperation in military matters. We discussed the cooperation in technological matters. Israel and Germany are two of the most advanced economies in the world. We have extraordinary people, extraordinarily gifted people, and in the field of high technology, high tech, deep tech, AI, quantum, all these things that are going to change the face of this planet and the future of humanity. These are things where we are ranked very high. But together, cooperating in this, we'll rank even higher. There's not much space to go. But I think that working together, we can not only better the citizens of Israel and Germany, but I think we can better the world and our immediate neighborhood, the Middle East. So we discussed that, and we are ready to seize the future together. This will help peace. We are at the point where we believe that peace opportunities are at hand. The Iran axis has been battered. It was the major engine of disruption in the negative sense, of terrorism, of extremism and fanaticism, and it's definitely been relegated to a back seat. So now opportunities for peace are there. We tend to exploit them. I'm going to discuss them with President Trump when I meet him later on this month, but we discuss them as well. And we discuss, of course, how to bring an end to the Hamas rule in Gaza, because that's an essential part of ensuring a different future for Gaza and a different future for us facing Gaza. We finished the first part, as you know, phase one. We're almost there. We have one more hostage deceased, Hani Gvili, a hero of Israel, to return here. And then we very shortly expect to move into the second phase, which is more difficult, or equally difficult. I would say more difficult because nobody believed that with our combined action, Israel's military action in Gaza City and President Trump's effective diplomatic action in bringing the Arab and Muslim world to press Hamas to give up the hostages, nobody believed that we would achieve it, but we did. And now we have a second phase, no less daunting, and that is to achieve the disarmament of Hamas and the demilitarization of Gaza. And as I mentioned to the Chancellor, there's a third phase, and that is to de-radicalize Gaza, something that also people believed was impossible. But it was done in Germany. It was done in Japan. It's done in the Gulf states, can be done in Gaza too, but of course Hamas has to be dismantled. These are challenges in front of us, but we do not shirk from them. We think we have great opportunities. I think Israel, the people of Israel, the soldiers of Israel, have demonstrated amazing resilience and amazing courage. We have fought a seven-front war against malign forces led by Iran that are openly committed to annihilate us. This, 8 decades after the Holocaust, an openly declared attempt to annihilate the Jewish state. Imagine that you had an openly declared attempt to annihilate Germany, or an openly declared attempt to annihilate France, or Austria, or any other country. Israel, faced with that, obviously mustered its resources and fought a just war with just means. We are undergoing vilification on a historic scale for the last 80 years, but not for the Jewish people. We've been maligned through centuries. In the Middle Ages, in Germany, and throughout medieval Europe, we were accused of poisoning the wells, of slaughtering Christian children to use their blood to bake Passover matzahs. We were carrying vermin. These were the accusations that were always preceded the actual annihilation that followed. And Jews were attacked, they suffered pogroms, they suffered expulsions, and they suffered wholesale massacres from a very large swath, from Spain to Ukraine. Enormous vilifications, enormous attacks, culminating in the greatest massacre of them all, the Holocaust. What has happened since? We thought, some thought, actually I didn't, but some thought, that anti-Semitism was gone. It's not gone. That cyclical phenomena of attacking the Jews in ways that prepare their destruction, delegitimize them, was transferred from the Jewish people to the Jewish state. It just took a respite, a few decades, where anti-Semitism was not done in polite company. Now it's done in every capital. And people carry the flags of Hamas. Flags of Hamas. These people who tortured women, raped them, then beheaded them, burnt children alive, babies alive, took hostages, Holocaust survivors, babies. This is outrageous. People demonstrate for them and accuse Israel of bogus war crimes because Israel has gone to lengths that no army in history has done in the most difficult urban warfare situation, asking the population to leave, and Hamas shooting them to keep them there so the casualties can appear on the various international networks. I understand the enormous effect this has on the publics in Germany and Europe and to some extent America. But I will tell you, as I told the Chancellor, there's one big difference. We may not be able to control that, but we have changed Jewish history in the sense that those who vilify us can no longer annihilate us. Because when they come to do that, as they did on October 7th, we roll them back. And as they try to put a noose of death around us, as Iran tried with its proxies, we roll them back. That's the big difference. And I think this truth will emanate, and I commend the Chancellor for speaking the truth in a number of important occasions. But we still have a job to do to explain what it is we're fighting, how we're fighting it, and why we're doing what we're doing is not only for our defense, but for Germany's defense, and the defense of free societies everywhere, and I will say our non-radical Arab neighbors as well. In fact, they understand it better than most. On the question of two states, no, we have a different point of view, obviously, because the purpose of a Palestinian state is to destroy the one and only Jewish state. They already had a state in Gaza, a de facto state, and it was used to try to destroy the one and only Jewish state. We believe there's a path to advance a broader peace with the Arab states and a path also to establish a workable peace with our Palestinian neighbors. But we're not going to create a state that will be committed to our destruction at our doorstep. And as you know, Israel is gigantic. It's 50 kilometers wide, 70 kilometers wide at its widest point. And we are obviously going to take care of our security. The one thing that we will always insist upon is that the sovereign power of security from the Jordan River, which is right here, to the Mediterranean Sea, which is right there, that will always remain in Israel's hands. And that means that Israel will control its destiny, continue to protect its security for our sake and for others as well. I have to say, Friedrich, I think we're at the cusp of a new age, because I think that we will achieve the expansion of peace. I think that we are at a new age because I think that the possibilities of technology, with their risks, especially in AI, but with their positive benefits, are enormous in every field. I mean, from agriculture to health to transportation to, and I think that we are together, we can lead this and become not a secondary power, but a primary power in the advance of humanity. I look forward to our discussions, and I have to say that your wife was supposed to come here. Bring her next time. It'll be an opportune moment to expand on these things. So welcome, Friedrich. Welcome, Fred.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
We'll start with the questions from the forum.
Prime Minister.
Okay, there we have it. The Israeli Prime Minister and German Chancellor will now take questions from the audience. However, we heard Benjamin Netanyahu echo those talking points, where, of course, Germany, along with France, the UK, Germany didn't support a Palestinian state at the United Nations just a few months ago. And of course, as Israel receives international condemnation, it continues to echo those talking points, which have previously been scrutinized by Germany's European partners, like Spain, like the United Kingdom, and like France. Of course, Benjamin Netanyahu continued to label, go against Germany's final goal of a two-state solution there in the region. However, joining us now is Yossi Kapawasa. He's an Israeli intelligence and security expert, and he joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Yossi, for joining us here on NewsX World. Of course, there was one factor there which Benjamin Netanyahu openly disagreed with Chancellor Friedrich Merz, a two-state solution, which Israel, of course, rejects. But Germany supports, however, they did not support a Palestinian state and recognize a Palestinian state at the UNGA this year. Your thoughts about the current German and Israeli relationship, and in fact that the German Chancellor has gone over to Jerusalem today and met with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. What does it say about the current standard of Israeli and German relations?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I think German-Israeli relations are special because of the history that is hovering over this relationship all the time. And at the same time, we do have a lot of cooperation on the one hand and some disagreements on the other. And one of the issues that attracts much attention is this disagreement regarding the future of the Palestinian state. We are definitely concerned about this illusion that we can build a Palestinian state before the Palestinians change entirely the narrative. We have to understand what is the Palestinian narrative. The Palestinian narrative is all about struggling against the Jewish state, struggling against Israel until its demise. We saw that in Gaza before October 7th, and this is the same narrative adopted by the Palestinian Authority. They pay salaries to terrorists, they do a lot of incitement, and they refuse to accept that there is something called the Jewish people, and that Jews have some sovereign history in this piece of land. and they consider the Jews to be the worst creatures ever created, and that's why they should struggle against them. This is if you look at the textbooks, this is what they're talking about. If you look at the sermons in mosques and so on and so forth, and what the leaders are saying, this is what they're believing. So having them, letting them have the capability to establish a state of their own that would be used in order to struggle against Israel makes no sense from an Israeli point of view. We have to understand that. And we had an unbelievable example to what's going to happen with October 7th. So, of course, Israel is very concerned. The Trump plan, is aware of that, and that's why it says that the consideration of a pathway towards Palestinian self-determination that may take the shape of statehood is dependent on the reforms in the Palestinian Authority. And once the Palestinians recognize that there is a Jewish people, that the Jews had a history in the land of Israel, that the Jews are not the worst creatures on earth, and that you should stop struggling against and fighting against the existence of the state of Israel, then there can be a chance of moving towards a Palestinian statehood. But the urge to move in this direction before this happens, that characterizes what France and Spain and Ireland and others, the United Kingdom, did by recognizing a Palestinian state, is giving rewards to the Palestinians before they went through any reforms. And the interesting thing is that by adopting the Trump plan in the Security Council, in Resolution 2308, the international community recognized that there is no such thing as a Palestinian state at the present. And it should be established only once the Palestinians go through those reforms that they refuse to, of course, implement. So it makes a mockery of this recognition of a Palestinian state, because the resolution states that there's no such state, and it will be considered in the future. And the funny thing about the wording of this resolution is that it says that we believe that having a state is the aspiration of the Palestinian people. It's not the Palestinians who say so. The Palestinians' aspiration is to make the state of Israel disappear. That's their aspiration. We believe, those who adopted this resolution believe that this is the aspiration of the Palestinian people. No, we saw it exactly on October 7th. If this was the aspiration, they could have had a state in Gaza and make it prosperous and a nice place to live in. Instead, they were taking every resource they have in order to wipe Israel off the map.
Yossi, of course, Berlin sees defending Israel's right to exist as a fundamental national obligation, as it takes full responsibility for the Holocaust. Israel, however, echoed some talking points. Benjamin Netanyahu echoed some talking points that many European leaders have disagreed with. Critics would say, in some ways, especially when it comes to this Israel and German relationship, that Israel could possibly rely on historical guilt rather than strategic alignment with Germany on this case. Germany, of course, stopped arms deals to Israel in the height of the international condemnation. What are your thoughts on that relationship?
Well, first of all, even in recent strategic considerations, I think that there's much in common between us and the Germans. And it was Chancellor Merz who said during the Israeli operation in Iran that we are doing the dirty job for everybody else. And so he definitely understands how important what we're doing against extremists and radicals in the Middle East that threaten not only the Middle East but the entire globe. He appreciates what we're doing. And regarding Gaza, yes, I am definitely concerned with the fact that the Hamas incitement against Israel managed to convince some European leaders that Israel is conducting a very fierce campaign against civilians in Gaza. This was never the case. And it's a pity, because this story about starvation and genocide and so on and so forth had an impact on Western leaders, including on Chancellor Merz, and he decided to deny Israel certain weapons
Yes.
for a short period of time. This was a big mistake on his part, in my mind, and I hope this visit comes in order to remedy the damage done.
Yossi, of course, Germany has been publicly critical of the civilian casualties which occurred during the Gaza war, 70,000 of which Palestinians died. Do you think that criticism matters to Israeli policy? And is Israel worried about losing Germany's reliable vote at the United Nations?
No, because of two reasons. First of all, Israelis know that these are lies. Israelis who are involved in this fighting, they know these are lies. And we believe that at the end of the day, truth is going to prevail. So we believe that eventually the Westerners who know better to judge what is true and what is a lie, will understand that these were lies that they will pray for. And I believe this is going to be true also with Germany. Secondly, there is this historical layer that you mentioned and I spoke about as well. It is important in our relations with German people and with Germany as a state. And their commitment to Israel's security is profound. And we actually also committed to their security, not only by fighting the radicals and the Islamists here, but also by supporting the capabilities of the German military. And we've just sold the Arrow 3 to Germany as a defense system against ballistic missiles. And there's a lot of cooperation going on between Israel and Germany, and I think everybody is aware of that.
Okay, Yossi, do stay with us as we have further updates to discuss with you. But first, we head to Europe for our next story. And the Russian Defense Ministry has said that their forces have captured 2 villages in Ukraine. The ministry says Russian troops took control of Kerchenivka in Ukraine's northern Kharkiv region and Ravine village in the eastern Donetsk region, marking fresh territorial gains on the ground. The Russian Defense Ministry also claims it carried out what it calls a massive strike on Ukraine's military-industrial complex, energy facilities and port infrastructure in the city of Kremenchuk. Moscow says the strikes targeted transport networks, fuel depots, military airfields and long-range drone facilities. Russian officials say the attack came in response to Ukraine's overnight strikes on civilian objects inside Russia. The ministry added that the operation involved long-range, high-precision air and ground-based weapons, including Kinzhal hypersonic missiles and long-range unmanned aerial vehicles. Meanwhile, Russia's Rostov region governor says that air defense systems intercepted Ukrainian drones. And earlier today, Moscow claimed it shot down 77 Ukrainian drones overnight across several regions. Joining us now is Professor Madhav Nalapat. He is the editorial director of the Sunday Guardian. He joins us live from the Indian capital of New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us, Professor Nalapat, here on NewsX World. Of course, Russia continues to claim gains in Ukraine. However, we have heard diplomatically from the United States that a truce could be very near. Do you think Russia is possibly using claims of these territorial gains as leverage in its diplomacy?
Look, the fact of the matter is the Russians were ready to settle in 2022 itself. In April, Prime Minister Modi, in front of President Putin, said this is the era of peace. And unfortunately, our Ukrainian friends decided not to follow that wise advice, and they continue to press on with this conflict. As a consequence, they've lost a lot of precious human life. They have lost a lot of territory, and they're losing more every day as we speak. President Putin has already made it clear he will not stop unless he gets hold of the whole of the Donetsk region, and he intends to keep that. I mean, let's not forget that the German armies, they marched right up to the gates of Moscow. They entered Leningrad, they entered Stalingrad. The Stalingrad and Leningrad were the names of those countries at that point in time. And yet finally the Russian forces beat them back. This is the kind of people the Russians are. And I wish our Ukrainian friends had heeded the advice of their true friends. Unfortunately, there are people who counsel them to keep fighting on and to keep wasting precious Ukrainian lives in a fruitless cause. Because we have pointed out from the very beginning that this war is lost from the Ukrainian point of view. The disproportionate numbers, both in military as well as in territory, is just too large to be overcome. And unfortunately, let me tell you, Thomas, the world is at risk of moving into an even more wider wall, a very unfortunate development, because there have been some intemperate remarks from inside some countries in Europe, and the Russians have said, if the Europeans want war, we will give them war. And frankly, that would be a disaster for the whole world, that you have a war between NATO and Russia. And don't forget, Russia is the world's preeminent nuclear power. It's got a lot of nuclear weapons, it's got a lot of advanced weaponry, and it's not by no means
Yes.
an easy force. So I would say the sooner the Ukrainians accept that, and the sooner they accept the terms that are acceptable as present to President Putin, in the next, we don't know. I mean, in 2022, he's accepting much less than what he is demanding now. And if this war goes on, he wants even more. So I wish the Ukrainians now listen to the counsel of Prime Minister Modi, listen to the counsel of President Trump, and end this war. Because I think that is very important. And frankly, now the only way they can end this war is by ending it on terms acceptable to the Russian side. And if that involves territorial concessions, unfortunately, that's the price Ukraine has to pay for the stoppage of hostilities. So, from India's point of view, we strongly urge Ukraine to to accept the Russian terms as they are now and end this war before more precious lives get lost, and frankly, the whole world continues to be thrown to disruption by the sanctions, by the unproductive sanctions that have reduced some European economies
Okay.
to the brink of depression and to unemployment and to mass protests in the streets. So I think the sooner this war stops, the better it is for the whole world.
But
Thomas.
Professor Nalapat, of course, Russia invaded Ukraine. What does it mean for international law if this peace deal is signed with territorial concessions from Ukraine? What does that mean in the long term?
Look, I would like to point out that India is a country that's lost precious territory at the hands of two countries, Pakistan and China. Where was this international community, quote unquote, when this kind of land grab took place? Has there been even a single voice of protest? Not at all. In fact, President Macron is now on his way or already there in Beijing, and he is being feted and feasted by President Xi. So where is this talk of territorial integrity when there have been so many instances of states marching into other states and taking over territory? Does it matter only because the Ukraine is a part of Europe? Is it that to Europeans only Europeans are important and the rest of the world is not important? Sorry, we regard the whole world as important. We regard the whole world as equal, and everybody is important. So you can't have one standard for Ukraine, one standard for India, and one standard for several other countries, because we are not a European power. And I mean, let's face it, Thomas. After 1945, a large number of territories were surrendered by the Germans to the victorious allies. Is there any protest about that? Not at all. The fact is that wars always result in a realignment of territory, and this is something that's gone on since time immemorial. So it's I'm not going to use the word hypocritical, but it's very strange that this argument is now being trotted out. But the problem is that as a consequence of this argument, the Ukrainians are being told to fight on when their military is feeling demoralized, when people are deserting and they're losing their precious lives on the battlefield every day. So let's be honest. Let's not talk of some abstract principles that nobody follows. Let's be honest. Let's talk about the real world.
Okay.
Let's what is actually done. And what is actually done is that territorial concessions are unfortunately a part of the results of any war in history. Thank you.
Okay. Professor Madhav Nalapat, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. We now move back over to the Middle East, and Iran's foreign ministry says that 55 Iranians deported from the United States will return to their home country in the coming days, in the second such deportation under President Donald Trump's immigration crackdown. In September, US officials said the US had identified about 400 Iranians to be deported, with the first flight carrying 120 Iranians making its way to Tehran via Qatar's capital. The transfers mark an unusual moment of coordination between the two nations at loggerheads over Iran's nuclear program, which Tehran says is purely civilian, but Washington asserts is aimed at building a nuclear bomb. Let's take a listen in.
و قاعدتاً هر ایرانی هر جای دنیا که باشه آزاد هست هر زمان که بخواهد به ایران برگرده. دفتر حفاظت منافع ما تسهیلات لازم رو فراهم کرده و ظرف روزهای آینده حدود 50 نفر 55 نفر از این اتباع ایرانی به ایران باز خواهند گشت.
Okay, joining us now is Yossi Kapawasa. Once again, he is an Israeli intelligence and security expert, and he joins us live from Tel Aviv. What are your thoughts on this, deportations to Iran, Yossi?
Well, I think on the one hand, it's the Americans want to expel from the United States people that reach the United States in a way that is considered to be problematic from the American point of view. And I wouldn't read too much into it in the context of the relationship between the United States and Iran, because the problems that are keeping them apart are more important than the readiness of the Iranians to accept those people that were expelled from the United States. The issue of enrichment of uranium is more complicated, and what the Americans want from the Iranians is to give up on enriching uranium, and the Iranians refuse to accept it. And the pressures that are put on the Iranians may convince them to give up on the issue of receiving those Iranians that are being expelled from the United States, but I'm not sure they are strong enough in order to convince them to give up on enrichment of uranium.
Yes, Yossi Kapawasa, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but thank you very much for joining us. We now move on to some further developments. In Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi is preparing for a round of high-level diplomatic visits to Russia and Belarus. Tehran says Araghchi will hold meetings with senior officials in both Moscow and Minsk next week as part of ongoing political consultations. The Iranian Foreign Ministry also confirmed that President Masoud Pezeshkian is set to travel to Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan in the coming days. Officials say full details of the president's itinerary will be announced later by his press team. The visits highlight Iran's push to deepen regional ties at a time of shifting alliances and growing geopolitical tension. Okay, we now move on, but stay in the region. And Israeli soldiers opened fire at a Palestinian teenager who, they claimed, was driving a car at an accelerated pace towards them. They also hit another Palestinian bystander, which the army later clarified was uninvolved in the incident, as per Israeli security official reports. The incident took place at a checkpoint in the West Bank city of Hebron. According to the Palestinian state news agency, the bystander was identified as 55-year-old Ziam Ziad Nayam Abu Dawood, who was a municipal street cleaner and killed in cold blood while doing his work. Moreover, the driver was identified as 17-year-old Ahmed Khalil al-Rajabi. Well, that's all that we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more international updates.